This episode of the KrakCast is brought to you by our friends at BigDoor24.pl. It's a new service that not only matches expats with local property experts who speak their language, but it gives you cash-back discounts on successful credit applications. So go to BigDoor24.pl. That's BigDoor24.pl. Find out all the information you need to get the mortgage you want. Again, BigDoor24.pl. Make sure you use the special promo code KrakCast to get a great cashback offer. And now, on with the show. KrakCast News is back, and so am I. Welcome back, everybody. I'm John. There's Josh. Dave is here. Dr. Mike. All four of us ready to go this week. A lot to talk about. Let's talk about food, because I'm hungry. Let's start by talking about food. Interesting story this week. You know, at the corner of Strażewskiego and Poznan, that's right, like literally right in front of Wawel. At the corner there, it's been an empty lot for as long as anybody can remember. There's some souvenir stands. There's a place to grab some snacks and whatnot. And it's very strange because it looks like prime real estate. But Dr. Mike, this week we learned about the latest chapter in the drama of what's happening to this piece of property.
Yeah, basically everybody was assuming that something will be going up there soon enough after so many years of just being an empty lot. But no, a couple of food trucks showed up there, and it turns out that a lot more food trucks are going to be showing up there, and their lease is probably going to be for the next 2 years. You might remember that before there was like this cheap wooden stand selling kebabs and souvenirs, and didn't really look too tasteful. People were protesting, and it was torn down last fall.
And it's been empty since then.
It's been empty, yes. A new company bought it, and everyone was like, oh, they're going to build something fantastic, nice, beautiful here. Nothing, and all of a sudden these food trucks show up. What should be mentioned is that the previous company that actually owned that lot and wanted to build something sent the city about almost a dozen different proposals for what they want to get approved from the city. All their ideas were shot down, and the previous owners of that lot just said, screw it, and sold it to somebody else.
So we're still going to get some kind of development there. We're just getting the food trucks in the meantime while some kind of project gets approved. Is that right?
That's probably what it's going to be looking like, yeah.
Dave, it seems like food trucks are a good idea as a temporary fix. Huh?
Yeah, I like it because of the geography of the old situation, John, and welcome back from your holidays.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have your big baldy head back in the studio. Basically, when you leave Bubba Castle, one of the great tourist attractions of Poland, and it is fabulous. It's a fantastic event walking around it. There is a garden bar where you can maybe get a sandwich and a beer inside Bubba Castle, a small one. But when you're down that area of the city, you're surrounded by like the 5-star hotels, the Sheraton, Podvavelum. There's not really anywhere until you get back to Grodzka where you can go for a snack and some respite and coffee, which is much needed after a long walk around the cathedral and surrounding grounds of Wawel Castle.
You guys know this better than I do. Can
I just say, it looks a bit crappy at the moment. Yeah. They need to sort that out. Yeah. More trucks, bit of dressing, bit of decoration. Presentation, exactly. Make a hipstery, is hipstery a word?
It is now. Yeah. Isn't that place in Kazimierz off of, what's it called, Wawrzynce, isn't that the only permanent food truck place in Krakow right now, or is there another one?
No, there's another one off Cooper, also in Kazimierz.
Yeah, like
of course,
100 meters away.
Behind the synagogue, that's right.
That's right.
That's a small one, though, isn't it? It was maybe 5 or 6 trucks.
They've managed to rather artfully arrange several food trucks in there. That's and it's like gravel.
Well, how many food trucks do you think they can fit on this place next to Wawel? It's not that big.
I don't know, more than angels dancing on a head of a...
Well, at the moment, they've got 2 there, and they look very miserable in the photo, in the article.
And they're sort of parked side by side. It's all a bit kind of...
Yeah, let's go for
rubbish.
But about the place,
7 or 8 food trucks and some coffee and some dessert.
About the place, it's obviously very prime real estate. We don't know what's going to be there. If you had to bet, though, guys, do you think it's going to be super upscale apartments or super upscale office space or something else? What do you think?
It's either going to be another hotel or some kind of apartment building that's going to show up on Airbnb within 15 minutes of opening.
Yeah, it's too small. You'd never get commercials on there, I don't think.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But it's it's at least 2 years away. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, well, this lease apparently, or the food trucks, next 2 years. I mean, they might cut it short, but it's not going to be anytime soon.
We'll see what happens. Kind of staying in the same area of the city. This is a story that caught our eye this week because we remember the earlier iterations of this that we're talking about the Krakow Balloon, the sightseeing balloon, which if you don't know, if you weren't here about 10 years ago, started out actually very close to where we're sitting right now. just at the end of Dietla on the left. I forgot the name of that street.
Stanisławska.
There you go. And it started right there, and it's fixed to the ground. It doesn't it's not free floating. It's wired to the ground. It goes up 100 meters,
150 meters with tourists.
150 meters. And the idea, of course, is to get a great view of the city. Then not long after that, for reasons that I'm not sure about, it moved just exactly across the river on the opposite side, over there by the old Hotel Forum, and operated until about 6 years ago?
Something like that, maybe even 4 years
ago. It was the one thing that comes to my mind when I think about the old Krakow Balloon was how often it was grounded, because if there was a breeze of like more than 1 kilometer an hour, it was grounded for safety reasons.
Can I just say, 4 times I remember trying with my wife to have a go on the balloon. She very much wanted to see the view, and 4 times we trundled down, and in the stillest conditions where a golfer would throw a piece of grass in the air and divine absolutely nothing from its land.
Feathers falling vertically.
We were told it was too windy to go up.
It didn't take much, for sure.
And the other thing about the old balloon was it was an advertisement as well, which people didn't like, and it used to get very dirty. It used to, it
was kind of dingy looking, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like a big, giant, dirty looking balloon.
Well, I don't honestly remember the.
What a metaphor!
Yeah, wasn't it RMF or something like that?
Did we see a date for its exact? Is it just this summertime, or we're not sure about the date when it's coming back this year?
There's no specific date put, but
it is this year, this season.
It's a matter of. I think they said just before the beginning of the summer season, so I think there was something about June.
So if conditions are right, once a month, the mangy balloon majestically reaches for the site.
Are they advertising for a balloon washer?
Actually, yeah. We should also mention that this will no longer be an advertising balloon, but a public service announcement balloon. They're going to
that's exciting.
Yeah, they're going to have a bunch of logos or clouds on
like
it.
Vote Microvsky.
Yeah. And depending on the air pollution levels on that day, the color will change. So the darker red.
Also, have an air pollution balloon. That's wonderful. Great idea.
They're also planning on having sensors and weather.
It sounds like the owner of this balloon was caught with a very expensive balloon that he had nowhere to store and has been furiously applying for all different sorts of EU grants and little workarounds to make this thing seem like a viable economic.
Did someone tell him if you take the bung out, you can actually compress it down to a much smaller size?
This seems like another attempt to kind of rejuvenate that area. It's called the Boulevard Nad Wyslański, over there by the old Hotel Forum, where they had the man-made beach and the club, and there was like a floating barge pool.
Shitty club. And
there's different things. And it's just
rubbish beach, yeah.
Let's just dwell here for a second.
Sorry, there's a fun park, and over the years, they just haven't been able to make it work.
John, as a man who's, grew up in a landscape full of artificial beaches and sandbanks, does it make you a bit sad to see the efforts that were made to turn the area?
Artificial beaches?
I don't know. Isn't Florida
a lot of real beaches in Florida, too.
Isn't Florida famous for development?
No, I mean, it is kind of funny, but I think the Krakow is working with what they have, and what they have is the river, obviously, and the rivers in so many European cities. You go to Budapest, you go to Prague, Berlin, Paris. The river is the focal point of social life and just strolling. And in Krakow, it's kind of an afterthought when it comes to tourism.
You haven't been to Rome, then?
Say they made an artificial beach. It's just some sand on the grass. It's ridiculous.
Well,
it's the worst.
It's a big sandbox.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a sandbox.
Full of cat poo.
You remember the floating pool in the barge?
No, that wasn't allowed in. Nobody was allowed.
They didn't get permits for it, so it was just there.
It was just there in front of it. Nobody was allowed to use it.
So there's an identity crisis. They don't know if they want to attract families, and kids. Do they attract the nightlife club crowd? What are they trying to do?
That's what they tried to do with that with the beach club. it was a dreadful place, terribly run. If you're listening, God, you did a terrible job. And that's just closed now, isn't it? What happens?
Basically, the city said, "We know we gave you permits earlier, but your place is 25 centimeters too tall, and it blocks the view of the river for other people walking around."
Why don't they just let someone build a low-level, nice boutique kind of development there and really turn it into something great for the city?
There's a couple of problems there. First of all, the city really doesn't want to allow anything to be built there just because they say it ruins the view. I'd argue that the view is crap anyway, so build something there.
That's why I said low level, because I knew that'd be an issue. But
the other problem is
do something with it.
That place occasionally gets flooded, so that increased costs and the only thing that makes sense then are food trucks. Actually, that would be a good idea. Of us 50 food trucks along the river there, and just with cafe tables and serving beer. That would be awesome.
Isn't it connected with the larger problem of what to do with the Hotel Forum, which just sits there
Well, hold on. I think there are going to be some people scratching their head here, because it's become quite a popular destination. The Hotel Forum. There's a lot of bars. bars and trendy places on the ground floor now.
It can't go on the way it is. You just can't leave it like that.
I suppose I'm talking about that beach bar and the fake beach development, which I consider was an unmitigated disaster and took years to get approved and finally finished. I'll never forget when I actually finally walked down, after all the years of hype, to Krakow's artificial beach, how disappointed I was. But we should mention that there are some great bars in the Hotel Forum. It is a kind of cool space, as long as you're inside it and you can't see the outside of the building. It's quite a trendy
and it's actually
Berliner style kind of establishment.
You can step outside and there's a lot of, you're by the river, you can be loud because it's far away from anything. It's a really nice place to go party, but that building is just atrocious, and who knows what's going to happen with it.
We're talking about the Hotel Forum, yeah?
Yeah,
You really need to find asbestos-eating organisms, don't
and
we?
the horrible wooden beach bar. It was just ill-conceived.
The whole thing was just a mess.
Luna Park.
Is the Luna Park still there, the fun park? Or is that
What's it called, Luna Park?
It's called Luna Park, yeah. In Polish, that's what they call it.
It pops up once or twice a year, and I think it's here for this weekend, and I don't know for how much longer, though.
We really should do a special episode on all of the crazy stuff that's been in the Hotel Forum since it was built. I reckon we could get someone good on. If anyone here has been involved with the Hotel Forum, rented a property, and knows much about it, please get in contact with us.
Just to back up, the big news, the main point, of course,
is producers knocking shit around the place.
Yeah, the Krakow Balloon is returning in the next few weeks, and if you want to go up and get this amazing view of the city, you have to get lucky and just go on the stillest, most calm, wind-free day of the year and keep your fingers crossed, and maybe you'll get to go up in the balloon. Let's move on to something, just to return to a subject we've covered a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, so let's keep it brief. But there was a big development this week in the ongoing teacher strike, the development being that it ended. Dr. Mike, catch us up on what we need to know about the teachers going back to work.
Yeah, basically the teachers lost, or they didn't gain anything. When after a couple of weeks, it turned out that the government figured out a way around the teachers' strike, which was happening just before a series of major exams. The teachers realized they really didn't have any kind of bargaining chips. They probably were assuming that they would strike just before the final exams for all the pupils, and the government would bail. But no, the government basically called their bluff. Found a bunch of legislative ways around the fact that teachers weren't available to run these exams, and got through it. Also, what has to be noticed is that the public in general wasn't behind the teachers 100%. It was basically split down party lines. So the teachers didn't have any backing, and they probably didn't expect the strike to last so long, so they decided to suspend it. They didn't call it off, they suspended it.
Yeah, that's what I was reading, and that there's now been a bit of a split between the different teachers' union. The leader of the ZMP was the one who announced this, but there's some people not happy with him, Mike, isn't there?
Quite a few, because he didn't really announce to the council of the union that he was going to decide to suspend this strike. And there's also been issues about the fact that he hasn't been the greatest leader. Who knows if he's going to survive as the head of the teachers union for much longer.
So you have to consider this a loss for the teachers, basically.
Yeah, they definitely didn't win anything.
It was a nuclear option closing down the exams, so they got walked up to the cliff edge. This isn't over, I think, is the message here. It's becoming quite a nasty public politicized strike. It's like, as I was saying, I was up at my relations there for Easter, we were talking about it. It's the first really proper public horrible strike in Poland. The politics of it is quite fascinating to everyone. It's on the nightly news every night, and we'll keep you appraised of the updates.
Actually, there's one more thing we just mentioned about is that the teachers also want to have some kind of negotiations with the government about reforming the education system, not just the financing. So they decided on a round table, and the government launched this round table discussion, which happened to be a square kind of oblong shape, but details, they probably didn't finish school, and the teachers union decided not to join it because and opposition party members also said this is just the government showing off, or trying to build some press. So the round table for education started with only
possibly worried about being nailed down on specifics about the extra productivity and hours that they're looking for back off the teachers if they want to raise. That's on the table. The teachers are looking for 30%, right? And the government's offered something around half that with conditions.
Around half that with conditions, but they were already getting some slight increases in pay over the next 2-3 years, but the teachers wanted more and sooner, and the government says
30%. Who gets 30% in one go? Whoever gets a 30% raise?
Politicians.
Apart from them, obviously, but Well, anyway, let's
People
move
are
on to
really
something
good
else
at
we've
their
talked
job.
about from time to time. Another one of our favorite subjects, that's the European Union. Of course, May 1st marks 15 years of Poland in the European Union. And Dave, this week we got some interesting statistics about the popularity of the European Union in Poland.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I'm always saying to you, John. The European Union is a complicated beast. We all have bits of it that we like and don't like. But leaving the whole British situation out of this, Irish people don't love everything about the EU. You know, we've had times where we walk back votes on the Lisbon Treaty, etc., etc. But, then if you ask the question, which is all this poll is doing, is overall, do you think the EU is a good thing? Then it switches, and most Irish people will tell you yes, because of the economic development. Joining the euro is massive for Ireland. Overall, it's been huge. I mean, less than 10 years ago, there was a massive political controversy in Ireland about the repayment of junior bondholders' debt. And it was saying that we were thrown under the bus by the ECB, who threatened to cut off liquidity funding to the central bank. But, it's a complicated subject, and people, even though they weren't happy about it, they weren't calling for Ireland to leave the EU. And I think it's the same situation with Polish people.
Yeah, but when you
even
talk,
peace voters who have their concerns about,
surveys here show like 90% support. I mean, what kind of cause gets 90% support?
Cause that invests tens of billions in your economy every year. That's the type of cause.
I mean, when you look at the questions, they're basically asking, do people generally like the EU? And most people say, well, yeah, even if they have something against the EU, they generally like the EU. And then they break down the questions where it turns out people like the fact that the EU is giving, Poland billions. So in that sense, it's a net income. They also, a lot of farmers like the EU as well because of all the subsidies and stuff like that.
All farmers like the common agriculture.
Here's $1 billion. Do you like me?
Yes.
That's basically the idea.
Farmers a platform to invest in machinery and equipment because they've guaranteed incomes at certain levels. So they all end up loving it after a few years.
I mean, what I think is funny is a lot of people that oppose the government say that the current government is anti-EU and wants Poland to leave the EU, a little bit of a poll exit, which doesn't make sense politically for them whatsoever. I mean, just look at these statistics and they realize that even their own voters love the EU. And I always try to tell people, it's like, well, for instance, you don't like the current Polish government, you didn't vote for them, but does that mean you want Poland to no longer be a representative democracy? It's the same way. It's like a lot of people have a lot of beefs against the EU, a lot of problems, but that doesn't mean they want their country to leave.
And I think peace note as well. We've covered this before about the EU, about how peace have been softening, the people they've been sending more conciliatory remarks, put Morawiecki more out front and centre, even though he is, the bloody Prime Minister. But
Kind of front and centre right there.
Yeah, trying to play down Kaczynski as the shadowy emperor of, Polish politics.
Well, that's the same question I always ask, Dave. You never give me an answer. If the EU is so great, why do rich, stable countries like Iceland, Norway, and Switzerland want no part of it? And let's say other countries like Albania and Bosnia are desperate to get in.
And why do countries like Germany and France, happily...
totally different. France because they get to call the shots. Germany because of war guilt. It's easy.
War guilt.
It is war guilt.
It's like 75 years ago.
A series of one-sentence explanations about the world.
This is
by John
Germany's
Atkins.
support. Germany's support for the European Union is completely war guilt.
Yeah, 75 years ago, they tried to take over the continent. They realized it's easier to do it through a few treaties.
People are intelligent enough to know that there's huge benefits by being in the EU.
So the Norwegians are idiots? Swiss are idiots?
The Norwegians were in a particular situation because of their oil wealth. Let's be real about it,
But they still get a lot of benefits from
that's
the EU,
true.
the common market, the connections, everything like that. They just basically got, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Well, a tiny country.
They're paying a lot for the privilege, actually. I mean,
Who's that?
Norway per capita pays as much as Britain does.
Does, yeah, and it has freedom of movement as well. It's basically a member of the EU.
But it doesn't have any influence.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a tiny country as well, John. So.
Well, we'll agree to disagree on that.
That it's a tiny country?
What about Holland, John? Is there war guilt as well?
No, it's not worth it. No, it's not. Well, no,
I got another reason
how
for
about
Ireland.
Spain? How about Spain? How about Ireland? What kind of rivers, oceans of money were thrown at Ireland, thrown at Spain, at Portugal, at Greece, and then you say you point to the approval rates for the EU, and you say, look, they just love the EU. Well, of course they do. They were, there were €100 bills raining from the sky for 30 years, and that's why Spain and Portugal and Greece and Italy and Ireland love the EU.
Well, Greece is a great example. They went to the brink of war with the EU. They elected a government to go there and tell tell them. But when it was eventually put to the Greek people at referendum, what do you want? Another bailout? That's what they took. That's the decision they took. Because when you get people to look at the EU as a whole, which they're more than capable of doing, they realise in general that the benefits can outweigh the.
I mean, as a side question, is there the queue to join the EU? Is there anyone in the queue? Who's at the front of that queue now? Are we talking about expansion still or not?
Not really.
It's really slowed down.
Is it Serbia or is it Balkan countries?
Yes.
The Ukraine was 10 years ago, but things went sideways there.
But Josh will be right. Your Serbia's and Albania, they're still miles away from the criteria. There's, I think, 20 articles you have to satisfy. It's not an easy process at all. And the accountancy standards have been tightened up hugely since the scandals posted.
I know there's at least 50 articles.
For everyone.
Succinctly put, Mike.
Well, speaking of different countries, interesting news this week that people from different countries are now constitute approximately 10% of Krakow's permanent population. Not the tourists, but people who live here. About 10% of people from other countries. What do you think, guys? What do you make of this?
Well, they're mostly Ukrainians, aren't they?
Yeah, by far the biggest group.
About half, yeah.
Russians,
I apologise for the Polish job I've stolen.
Men from Florida.
Me, yeah, exactly. Is that a kind of, does this have any significance or importance? Or is this a trend that's going to go up? What does it mean?
I think it's actually, when we talk about the statistics, it's significantly even more what they say, because they say it's 10% right now, but it's 10% of people that are registered here. How many people are from the EU that don't have to register in the standard way? They'll live here on a long-term or almost permanent basis that aren't registered. So I think it's even more than 10% right now. Especially,
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not registered here. I've been here ages. Are you, Dave?
Yeah, no, I registered. I'm registered. I had a Maldunic within a couple of years of.
So it could easily be 13, 14, 15%, maybe. Yeah?
It still took me a year or two to do. I think that's the general thing. People, if you're an EU citizen, you can come here, see what it's like. Maybe you're, working. Maybe you're doing something back home. You're doing something remotely, and until it's necessary for your job or for purchase an apartment, something big like that. But I think generally there will be one point. What was the lady? What was his name? Who we had on talking about all this? The immigration
Aneta.
expert, Aneta. Yeah. As we were saying, Poland's quite good at pushing you down the road of getting a Maldunic. It eventually that point gets made to you pretty quick, and you should definitely do that, listeners.
Do things legally. That's the way we do
Josh,
everything.
Do you not have one?
No comment.
Definitely no comment.
His lawyer advised him not to say anything on that subject. Yeah, exactly.
The face on you there.
Well, Krakow, because of the student population, because of tourism, because of the IT sector, just various things contribute to the growth of this number. I think it's going to continue to go up. The number of Erasmus students and medical students and people who stay on after a semester abroad and get a job, and all the outsourcing companies here that need their speakers of various languages. This is not going to stop anytime soon, I think. Yeah.
No, I'm excited about that development being finished and seeing who's going to move into all those office buildings behind Galeria Krakowska. I mean, that's
massive. Oh my God.
And that means people can commute right in and out as well because of the train lines. The city's moving onwards and upwards at a furious pace, which is why they're always digging up the bloody main roads in this town, and it's doing everyone's head in. Are we going to talk about the?
Well, I think actually I'm going to jump in on that one, because it seems to me that this, massive kind of infrastructure works, and serious disruption, major routes in and out of the centre of the city. They've got the, Krakowska is up, Królewska is up, and then plus the widening of the railways. And
it's annoying.
It's kind of impressive in a way that you look at a city that is right. We have got to get this stuff done, so let's just get it done. And it seems to me the underlying implication is that give it a few more years, and if this stuff isn't done, then the city is going to be rubber ducked. So they've got to, this stuff has got to be done now, because there's more and more things coming along.
Is the rubber ducked Cockney rhyming slang there?
It can be, yeah.
It is a bit like living in the middle of the Emperor's Great Rebuilding Project or something, though. I mean, it's getting a bit out of hand. I mean,
there's a legal term, usufruct, which is also...
Let's talk about Platz Invalidov. They're cutting down...
Traffic Mageddon on the west side of town. And the east side, every side of town, really.
Basically, if you're in the center of town, no matter which way you go, you're in a hole being dug in the ground or something. But yeah, on Platz Invalidov, we know that right now the trams going from Bagatelle out to Brnovice are basically stopped because all that is being dug up and renovated. And now Aleja Czech-Wieszczów, that crisscross right at Platz Invalidov, will be cut off as well. So 6 lanes of traffic will be cut down to 3, one northbound, one southbound, and one.
And it's already a nightmare right now.
I think they really just want to, really tighten up how much kind of motorised transport there is in the city centre. And I guess the way you do it is you just make the roads narrower.
Yeah, but people still need to go where they need to go. They're just going to go into, side streets and neighborhood streets, which is going to be a disaster for those people who live around those areas. It's not like people are going to say, okay, I'm not going to go to my job or whatever. I'm going to walk. It's not going to happen.
Well, but the argument is that there's public transport that can do that, so you shouldn't be taking your car.
And I love listening to the radio in the morning telling me about which trams are not riding right now because they got into an accident or they fell off the tracks or something broke.
Nice.
And half the city is stuck at 8:30 in the morning.
It keeps happening on the big junction at Starovica that a tram will get caught.
Right, and that was rebuilt
across the length. It happened to me there a few weeks ago. I mean, and hundreds of people dismounting every piece of public transport to walk up to Ice Congress Oval to next bus.
And that was, that was completely rebuilt, wasn't it? Like less than 10 years ago.
And let me tell you something, right? That bottleneck on Dietla, a shout out to all my fellow warriors who are having to get the bus down Dietla towards Starovica at the moment, because there's a nightmare blockage at the top of Dietla at the moment until you pass the roadworks at the top of Krakowska. It's an absolute pig.
I think every thoroughfare that has tram tracks is under some sort of renovation right now. Krakowska, right? We said Królewska, Bronovica. Where else? North of the old town is okay, I guess.
Starovica is okay, isn't it? But I mean, that's the only one, I think, going north-south.
I was thinking we were hung by our own hubris a little bit, John. Do you remember about 6 months ago we were throwing shade to people on the other side of town who had loads of roadworks going on? We were like,
yeah, whatever. I never go on the west side of town. Almost never.
Yeah. Nobody
lives over there. Josh, you obviously, I was going to ask you where you live. You live right here where we're sitting. Mike lives in the center of town. Dave lives in the center. I live on the east side of town, so you west side people can just deal with it, I guess. I don't know.
My parents live out on the west side.
Okay, there you go. We have some sympathy for Mr. and Mrs. Dr. Mike then. On the subject of transport, let's kind of transition to something we started talking about before we started recording. It's something that has literally just appeared on the streets of Krakow in the last couple of weeks. I already hate them desperately.
I'm so confused.
Okay, let's clarify here some terminology. In Polish, it's called hulajnoga. English, we call it a scooter, but we have to clarify it's an electric scooter, like the kind you stand on, not the moped kind of scooter, yeah? You know what we're talking about.
John, I am begging you to explain in plain English, simply and slowly to me. You are, Mike, or Josh. How the business model of the company who owns the scooters works, because I just don't get it.
Well, basically, the company owns X amount of them in the city. They drop them off everywhere. You get the app. You put money on the app, or you subscribe. I don't know exactly what the payment is.
And do you have to lock them?
No, you don't lock them, because once you stop using them, they automatically lock. They can't be used. It's not until somebody walks up to it.
And do they stand neatly upright?
Yeah, just like
until somebody knocks them down.
Exactly. But they're left, you grab one wherever it is, use your app to unlock it, write it, pay for it that way, then you leave it where you want to leave it.
No docking stations, no organization, just whatever, wherever.
Yes, and this kind of makes things complicated. First of all, you got to charge these, but you can, if you're a client, you can actually grab one of these, take them home and plug them in. And for that, you actually get paid. I don't know how much it is, like 8 zlotys or 12 zlotys for fully charging it.
Let's rewind there. You take one home, plug it in, and you get paid.
Yes, because you're paying for the electricity.
I'm definitely not more confused now.
But if one of your neighbors has the app and sees that there's one in your apartment charging, can they go in and say, hey, I want to use that one now?
I think there are some limitations there at that moment. But
if you give one as a gift to your little nephew and he brings it 200 miles away, will they know by GPS where it is and have you arrested?
If you've got a solar cell on your roof and you're also in one of those paying into the grid situations on a very sunny day and you're charging up a scooter, does that actually mean you're being paid twice to use that electricity?
The train takes off in Southampton.
And that'll be use it as a sex toy. Does that mean the company is actually
begging for vandalism issues, theft issues? If you know where the GPS thing is, it should be easy to get rid of that, disable that.
I have more questions. I'm very confused. I seen a girl maybe in her mid-20s fly past me on one of these the other day.
Too goddamn fast. These things are way too fast.
She was going downhill. Yeah. She was fine. She dismounted flawlessly. Obviously, an experience.
No helmet.
I want to know what the risk factor is here, Dr. Mike. We're talking about, what's at risk here? The ankle? I mean, nobody's wearing any protection here. They can go nearly 30 kilometres an hour. It looks very dangerous to me. Has there been a spate of, broken ankles in Krakow?
I think broken ankles will be the least of your problems, right? There have been no stats out, because it's only been in the city about a week or two. I mean, injuries I can see happening besides, colliding with other traffic, so that kind of trauma.
You're supposed to have your ear to the ground for the KrakCast, we don't have the letters, Mike,
There are no stats out when it comes to injuries. It's too new. But just imagine what could happen. Just falling off of that at higher speed means so any type of concussive injuries, or just scraping across the asphalt. So also the position you're standing in there doesn't really allow you to brace if you fall over. So I can really see a lot of people slamming their face into the ground and just scraping along the ground.
The medical term for a face plant, basically.
Basically, yes. Yeah. So that's going to be a problem. But it's
so the scooters come first, the injuries come next.
Yeah, I'm curious, legally speaking, how the owner of these scooters are.
That's my next question.
I'm sure there's a lot of legal language in the agreement when you sign up for the app.
Look, I have to say, right, there's an element of me that likes this. This is crazy new piece of capitalism, a company buying up expensive electronic products and just leaving them around for people to use and possibly pay for and possibly throw in the river. I like it. I mean, in general, there's a boldness to it. I would suggest you wouldn't, possibly some cities more than others, you'd be able to try this. Krakow's quite a well-behaved, civilized population, so maybe it'll be...
It's actually, thinking about it, they're doing something that's like a kind of, like older, more primitive technology, and that seems to be kind of, well, okay, they've just started it, so we don't know if it's going to be successful, but it's not dissimilar to the whole kind of Segway idea that never really got beyond, guided Segway tours, but actually I think we'd probably all be happier seeing people kind of like mooching around on Segways at sort of 10, 12 kilometers an hour than zipping around.
Yeah, they're too fast.
And
Segways are quite big and bulky, though. I don't know if I like either as a solution. Can people just walk? I hate to sound like an old fuddy duddy, but
it's like get on a bus or walk. It's one of those two, not this in between. And actually, there are a lot of legal questions about where exactly you can ride these, because the law doesn't really specify. Polish law says like these bikes and this go in the streets and on bike lanes. Yeah. Pedestrians are on sidewalks, but there's no law saying about motorized scooters. So
this is a problem that's all over the world, Mike, because cities and locations all over the world are having trouble dealing with this because electric scooters don't fit neatly into existing laws governing motorized transport. It's not a bike, but can they use the bike lane? And it's not a car, but can they ride in the street? And are they subject to the pedestrian rules when it comes to behavior or crosswalks and whatnot? Are they subject to the car rules? Nobody knows. But they cause a backlash everywhere they've been introduced. They're a blight on the street. They look horrible, just dumped everywhere. They'll end up in trees. Literally, they will end up in trees. Wait a few weeks. Wait until you're walking through the Rennick and people are racing or crisscrossing the Rennick on these things at 25 kilometers an hour. It's going to be a nightmare.
Drunk people.
Yes.
I'm looking back through the mists of time here to 25-year-old Dave and his mates out there. And if we saw a bunch of easy access 30 kilometer per hour machines, we'd be on it like a car bonnet. I mean, it wouldn't end well.
And you wouldn't be so pretty right now. No, and the cities, there's also, like you were talking about, these things being thrown around everywhere. That's another issue, because with the way the laws are right now, apparently if these are just left somewhere, if you leave it in any like public grassy area, technically the city can treat it like trash. So, if you leave it there, you can be fined. But also that means somebody could pick it up like trash and just throw it away. And if you leave it on the sidewalk, but like say you're a business leaving it on the sidewalk for another customers to come around, well then shouldn't you be paying the city? The city charges cafes for having tables out on the sidewalk. I
guarantee you, if you brought this in Dublin, I hate to malign my own city, but a bunch of young lads would sit around asking all these questions, and then eventually they go, I'm going to fuck it in the river.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. They just find as many as they could and they throw them in the river.
And that's what happens with bike sharing programs. All over the world, bike sharing programs end up the same way. They end up in the river. They end up in trees. They end up they're cost free. They're everywhere. They're in front of bars and bar areas. It's inevitable that vandalism and theft are going to kind of take their impact. But, they're investors. They know this going in.
So they've got a percentage for breakage, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Built in. But it'd be very interesting to see a few things, right? We'll keep an eye out in the next few months for how many of these companies around the world start going bankrupt, who their investors are. Like, is it the Uber kind of...
Yeah, let me stop you there, because Uber and Lyft, their American counterpart,
they were involved, yes.
Big money, first mile, last mile.
Your new giant blob of company that's never supposed to make any money, a la Amazon, without all the useful functionality of Amazon. Yes, I get where we're going with this. And the other thing I'd like to see, and I think we will see, is doctors starting to break ranks when the statistics do come in and say, we have noticed actually a big uptick in idiots who've found another way of
affects quality of life for other pedestrians and other people in the city. People don't like these people racing around too fast, disregard for safety rules, crisscrossing sidewalks and bike paths and everything. They just don't like it for obvious, understandable reasons.
Whatever happened to banning cyclists on the Planty, John?
I don't know. Kind of. It was a proposal. We talked about it a couple of times. It was a proposal.
The elections are over.
Nothing. Yeah, the elections are over. Yeah, and nothing came of it, thankfully, because
is that not how? Because I've every time I've been going around that sort of direction, I've not been cycling on the Planty because I can't be bothered to run the risk of.
No, you can. Oh, you can. Just behave yourself. That's all.
I always do.
Wear clothes.
You have a very stately riding style, Josh. You know, there's something
very
about
dignified.
Your upright, dignified nature on a bicycle, which is very unthreatening. I wish.
Have you ever seen me riding a bicycle? I'm a lunatic.
Yeah, you should get yourself an Uber Eats bag because that's all you see now, isn't it? Free scooters and Uber Eats drivers. Have we seen any Uber Eats drivers leaving scooters lying around? By the way, listeners, I have a phone-in suggestion here. I want everyone to suggest what the collective noun for a bunch of Uber Eats drivers sitting around waiting for a call outside a shopping centre should be. Collective noun challenge.
That's a good one. Last thing we're going to touch on today is an update on Wisla. We haven't talked about Wisla in a long time. Wisla Krakow. A couple of really interesting things this week. Now, just to remind you, some time ago, I don't know exactly when it was, but the leader, or at least the ex-leader of the Sharks, their ultras hooligan element, street name Mishek, was arrested in Italy.
What's your street name, son?
Florida Man. Florida Man, yeah, exactly.
The panhandle blade.
Arrested in Italy, extradited back to Poland to face numerous charges. Well, interestingly, since he was extradited back to Poland and since he's been under arrest and in custody, lots of raids have been going on, effective raids getting results that have taken down a lot of the other hooligan elements in Krakow and really impacted their business. And it's come out that at least allegedly, Mishek has switched sides, maybe trying to save himself. He's
making like a canary.
He's helping the cops and the prosecutors out. And there was a major raid last week on the Wisla hooligan leadership structure that resulted in a number of arrests. Among those arrested was the ex-VP of the previous ownership regime.
You never hear about a little raid, do you?
VP of Wisla Krakow, the ex-vice president of the club, was
a modest
room.
Raid carried out this morning.
You never hear about a mid-afternoon raid either, isn't it? It was a dawn raid
when they got raided and arrested. And this just, gives further evidence of something we've already known for a long time, that there was very close cooperation between official club officers and this hooligan element. And again, they're sitting in the same room when they get raided by the cops. So anyway, interesting. Mishek informing allegedly on his fellow hooligans, and now in the stands at Wisla matches, in the stands among the chants.
Oh, I heard about this rat song.
Yeah, the chants are about death to, they call it confidant, but like a police informant, rat. Yeah, death to rats, basically. And so, pretty serious. I don't know if we'll be seeing Mishek again in the stands at Wisla Krakow.
And how are they doing in the league?
Well, how can you stand if your knees are
bottom half? What?
How can you stand if your legs have been torn off at the knees?
Oh, getting graphic there, Doug. Only graphic.
Well, they are Sharks.
Exactly. Well, there's your update on the hooligan element of Wisla Krakow. Anything else to talk about, guys, before we...
It would be nice to hear some updates in the next few weeks about how they're turning the club around and how they've brought in a new administration. There seems to be thin on the ground, the information about what Wachowski's kind of ownership group have brought to the table and what their plans are for the future.
Majorly in debt. I think it's 80 million zlotys. Much better off than they were, about 4 or 5 months ago, but they still have serious financial problems. Struggling in the league. Again, they're in the bottom half, which is important because you have to finish in the top 8 to be eligible for the playoffs and the league championship and not promotion, but European tournaments. So that doesn't seem to be in the cards this year.
I just have a feeling that he wouldn't have done it unless he was deep in talks with someone who could come in and really salvage the situation, bring the club forward, make it into a real project, Don't
know.
But fair play to him for giving up a lucrative salary playing football in Germany. There's not many people who would do that.
Well, that's all there is to know this week. Thanks for listening. We'll try to do better next time.
We've got more stories. I want to keep...
Why do you always do that, Dave? You always jump in with, what about this? Can we just add that?
He doesn't know that you're about to do your wrapping up speech, does he?
Doing the wrapping up speech.
Dr. Mike, speaking of cutting someone off of the legs, that's Dave's specialty. What I'm saying, thanks for listening, goodbye. And Dave said, what about this? What about the story that we agreed to cut earlier? Okay, so Dave, I'll turn it over to you. And so
some people have told me that.
Make this even more awkward and extend it for another few minutes on a story we agreed to skip.
Before we do that, I'd just like to give you a chance to opine on any of the stories we discussed while you were away, John. Was there anything that you were kind of thinking, I wish I could have my...
You were listening, of course, weren't you?
To what?
They don't have the internet there out in the Everglades.
What about Poznan hiring the Indian drivers for the bus service?
Well, we were talking earlier about Krakow being 10% foreign.
which is
mostly Ukrainian.
With Poznan and Indians.
Which, yeah, I did think about it. The story that was also in the news, Poznan hired something like 50 or 60 bus drivers for the municipal bus fleet, the majority of whom were Indian or Ukrainian. I guess they're obviously using some kind of hiring agency, recruiting in India. And the issue is Ukrainians can more or less manage with the Polish, but most of the Indians cannot.
Hey, when was the last time you talked to a bus driver? And they just kind of point and
they're using like Google Translate or something. So I find it hard to believe there are not people in Poznan, unemployed people, who are eligible to do this job and willing to do it for the salary offered. I just that seems odd to me.
Yeah, but
they didn't go through. Maybe they didn't go through the. There used to be a law, Dr. Mike. I think you had to go through the employment office and verify that there was no one on their books registered as unemployed who was not interested in the job before you could hire, for example, Indians.
City transit officials over in Poznan did that. They went through the regional one, the national one, and finally they had to go international. They were not able to find people to fill these jobs for bus drivers.
Simple enough. You put a job ad out, John, and if nobody answers it, you're up shit creek. And then if you go to an agency and they still can't find you people at the right price, then you're really in trouble. Well, if you find that someone has gone to the effort of putting a whole program together to bring people in from India, then they really cannot get people. Why else would they do it?
Yeah, it's anecdotal, but maybe it does show just how tight the labor market is nationally and certainly in the big cities.
Like Polsat, not Polsat. The TV channel. Eurostat measure Poland's, I believe, at about 3.5, but the Poles have a weird way of calculating their own unemployment rate that nobody else in Europe uses, which has it a bit higher, over 5. But yeah, I think that's exactly what it is.
Either number is still damn low.
Yeah, it's around what people call
KrakCast, maybe that's an organisational
level.
What would you guess the starting salary is for a bus driver in Poznan?
I have no idea.
I'd be curious to know that. I'd be surprised if it was more than 3.5.
I mean, so yeah, after taxes, if they get more than like 1,500 zlotys in cash, I think
it might be a little more than that, but I'm just doing the math. I don't know
bus rides they want.
I know India, it's, I'm sure the wages are much lower, but are you really better off leaving India, moving to Poland, all the expenses that involves, and working as a bus driver? How much money are you really saving and able to maybe send back to your family? Is it really worth it, I guess, is my point.
Well, the question is, are they sending money back, or do they plan on this being, a total...
staying here permanently.
To the continent. So, they're a bus driver now, but they're also studying or preparing for another type of employment. As soon as they get legal status here, then they can apply for a job anywhere in the EU.
Speaking of Indians, I've not seen any stats on this. I'd be curious to know. Maybe somebody's working on it. And this sounds like a joke in a way that I don't mean it. Uber Eats seems to be dominated by Indians. We see the Indians working in Poznan. I'd be curious about the number of Indians officially registered in Poland, about the number on a graph. It must be heading straight up, I think.
I haven't heard any specific numbers, but I have heard that it's been a spike in about the last 2 or 3 years, and I don't really know why. But I have noticed as well, like you said, that the Uber Eats bicyclists, if they're not Ukrainian, they're usually
in Warsaw. Indian. They're all Indian, yeah.
On Radio Poznan, the head of the MPK spokesperson was quick to point out that these are Christians. I think it's closer to our culture and to us Poles. I sincerely hope that they will meet with respect for our work here. Yes.
What the hell?
Christians.
Getting out in front of any objections.
Well, India known for being a center of Christianity.
Get blown up, then you want to come to Europe.
Or as they're now referred to, Easter worshippers.
Easter worshippers, exactly.
I thought now it was a bit strange.
How strange is that?
The need to,
but there must be, between the Uber Eats people and the bus drivers, there must be employment agencies that are specialized, recruitment agencies that are specializing in Indian workers.
Again, there has to be one that listens to this show. Please reach out and tell us.
Do you believe in the baby Jesus? Do you like driving busloads of people around in cold countries?
Are you an Easter worshipper? Come to just like I know there are agencies that specialize in getting Vietnamese to come here to work on construction sites. Because a lot of construction workers are obviously a lot of Ukrainians, but Vietnamese as well.
But the Vietnamese, you had a lot of them here starting from the 70s and 80s in Poland. So it started up a bit of a small community, especially around Warsaw. And, once you have that kind of toehold, that kind of like foothold, then that can bring in other people as well.
There was a very interesting scandal where North Korean workers were actually found in Poland on Polish work sites.
Yeah, when I heard about this, I was...
a couple of years ago now.
They actually have one of those camps set up in Poland where they were working, but they were technically in Poland, but like all the legal status was they're back in North Korea, and all the money they earned, everything like that, went back there to the state with a little bit being left behind for the family. It's the same kind of camps they have set up like in China and in a few other southeastern countries.
When you say North Korea and camps, you have to be careful of kind of... be clear on this stuff, I guess.
No handicrafts or like, swimming in a pool kind of.
Not that kind of camp. Okay, see this weird direction we went into? I told you. All right.
I'm just so happy to have you back, John.
I love you too. I love you too. Yeah. Okay. I don't know.
John's really reluctant to wrap up the show now.
Yeah,
in case
exactly. I'm waiting on
interrupt.
big green flags to be displayed by all three of you.
I remembered last week I was called out on Facebook about my never having entered an 11-story.
You were.
I was, yeah. But
you were savaged
all
online.
I meant was one of the big 11-story blocks. Obviously I've been in all sorts.
Oh, he's been in a 10-story, 13-story.
And then I remembered that I actually lived in Warsaw for a few months, and I lived in one of those blocks. And then I felt really embarrassed because I was suggesting blowing all them up and starting again. And the reason I didn't remember it is it was so well.
And then I remembered I lived in
renovated.
Warsaw.
It was actually just a really nice apartment.
Okay, since we already have a couple of tangents, and since we're way off the track we're supposed to be on, can I add one last thing before we?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned my vacation. Yeah, I was gone for the last 2 weeks. Vacation was great, but can I just say that the Frankfurt airport destroys the myth of German efficiency? Can we agree that the Frankfurt airport is a shocking hellhole? I have to say horrible place.
The Badenhof one in Berlin as well is horrible. Tempelhof, very good, very good. Absolutely horrible. That's the low cost.
Well, at least it's small.
You're thinking Baden-Meinhof.
It's small. But Frankfurt is enormous. It's like 7 airports melted into one. You go upstairs, downstairs. You're never on the same levels where you need to be. It's a maze. It's one of those, what's his name? MC Escher maze. It's horrible. Anybody going to jump in and help me on this one?
I don't know. You haven't been to Heathrow recently.
I've never been to Frankfurt.
Walking around that airport thinking these people are famous for their design and efficiency and their ability to make goods. And no, this airport is just horrible. Sorry, Germany.
If you get a hot dog in Frankfurt, what's the sausage inside it called?
When you walk into Bangkok airport, there's all these ladies with welcoming bracelets of flowers, and necklaces of flowers, just to welcome you to Thailand. And
maybe we can finish on a word of praise, actually, for the Krakow airport.
Efficient,
which is great. And of course, it benefits from not being, ridiculously huge like Frankfurt. But you can't get lost. You go in, easy check-in, easy security situation. The gates are right there. How many gates? Like 12, something like that. And it's very good, nice experience at the Krakow airport.
It could be, except for getting a sodding bus from the gate to the airplane, which is 100 meters away.
You just triggered me. Can I say one more thing?
And it's not a good note. Yeah. And there's no McDonald's, Burger King, Costa, nothing in there, man.
Not even a Starbucks.
Yeah, forget about that. Finishing on a good note. Let's finish on an angry note here.
Yeah, fuck Krakow.
Anytime you have the bus, it means like at Krakow airport, you're bussed out 200 meters.
Your speedy boarding is fucked.
And you get off the bus, and that model, I forgot, it's the model that Ryanair uses. What's it called? 737?
Yeah, the 737.
You get off the bus, and you can either go to the front entrance or the rear entrance. Okay, now please pay attention here, people. Write this down.
It's printed on your boarding card.
When you get on the plane, the choice between front and rear entrance is not just an interesting little choice you get to make. No, it has some relevance to where you're sitting. If you're in row 3, go in the front. If you're in row 29, go in the fucking back. Sorry, I gotta get this off my chest.
On your Ryanair ticket,
this happened to me 3 times where you go in there and people say, I don't know. I think let's go in the front. I like the front. The front's pretty. No. Let's go in the front. And I'm seated in row 32, and I'm gonna, there's this collision in the middle of the plane where the everybody who made the wrong decision, which is about half the plane, collide in the middle. And excuse me, trying to get past each other. Please go in the right entrance. See, you got me. We should have finished 10 minutes ago because now I'm upset.
Our standard Ryanair setup is that in America I always think of everything as being a bit bigger. Do you look at our seat setup and think it's a bit Euro-weeny, or are you just as cramped on a 737 in America?
737's there, same thing. Yeah.
Ryanair flight would be the standard setup, I guess.
I mean, for a domestic flight, yeah.
I know. Just checking.
I don't know, but the thing with choosing the right entrance to the plane drives me insane. Actually, flying generally presses all my buttons, so to speak. But
registered.
You know it. Oh, noted. Okay. See, we're in weird territory here. Anyway, I'm going to do the merciful thing and bring this to an end. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for listening. Give us a like on Facebook. Call in and answer one of Dave's questions that he posed. What was the question about different things? You threw it open to the audience there.
Don't put me on the spot like that, John.
It was like three times you asked people to contact us.
Already. Just have to listen to the episode.
Just go back and listen to it. Just contact us.
You actually listen to them after we
random them. Comments, whatever you want. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the KrakCast News.